Hey, World History Honor students, this is Mrs. Sewell, and your lesson today is a video by me. Yay, you. Okay, today we're going to learn about the Enlightenment. Yesterday you did a preview, you did the reading in News ELA, and you looked at the Nearpod. Today I'm going to tell you about the Enlightenment, and you're going to fill out the graphic organizer. The main thing you want to do for each slide is write down what the important ideas that each of the Enlightenment thinkers gave you. So I'm going to try and give you some background and then be very specific about what you need to write down. All right, so first you got to know what the Enlightenment is. And like I said, you read about this yesterday. The Enlightenment is the intellectual movement in Europe during the 18th century, which would be the 1700s, when people began to question long-standing beliefs about society, religion, and government. It follows the scientific revolution where they started questioning the church and scientific ideas of the Greeks and things that they had learned, and they started to use rationalism. They wanted to, find out things for themselves, things, and make everything be logical in a sense. So you may want to write the Enlightenment definition down, and you can go pull it off these slides later, but you may want to write the Enlightenment definition down. I think there's room for it at the bottom of your paper on the back, so you at least have the definition, or you can throw it in your notes. All right. So the scientific revolution caused the Enlightenment, right? And you read about that a little bit yesterday. Scientific revolution, again, it was new ideas in science, and it challenged the power of the church, and it's followed by the Enlightenment. So that's really nothing else that you have to know. Let's see, we got to get to the people here because I have a limited amount of time. All right. Enlightenment ideas. They question religion, tradition, and superstition. They want to replace it with observation, logic, and reason. No more faith. They felt too much of life had been based on faith. So this is turning away even more from faith than they did in the Renaissance. And so they believe that your learning, scientific and academic thinking, and education should really be based on reason, not on religion. So those are important principles that they believed in. Okay. This Enlightenment covers a whole bunch of people in different countries in Europe. They were challenging the old ways of thinking, not very popular with the rulers of the time, because they definitely questioned divine right and the idea of absolutism. And so they also questioned the idea that people that were born of title and rank, like the lords and people with titles and rank, that they were actually better than everybody else. And for a long time, that had been the belief that, and it's based on religion, that God had chosen your family for privilege kind of thing. And so they were challenging those ideas as well. Here's your important thinkers. Voltaire, he's French. Hobbes, he's English. Locke is English. Rousseau is French. And Montesquieu is French as well. They're going to be the primary thinkers that we're going to talk about. These are the people that are on your graphic organizer, and you want to get the main ideas. All of these people you've seen in your civics class. If you took civics when you were in middle school, you've probably just forgotten them. You're going to see them all again when you talk about American history next year, and then they're going to roll them back out when you take government/civics in your senior year. So these people, of all the things we study, this is worth remembering. These people, because they had such an influence on our American Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and the way we view government. And this was really changing. Enlightenment is like they're seeing the light. That's, the idea of enlightenment. They've become wiser if you're enlightened. And so they've come up with new philosophies, new ways of change. And it was really important to the people of their time period and important to us. All right, so the first guy you got to know is Thomas Hobbes. He wrote a book called Leviathan. It's already in your notes. His big thing is he believed people were born in a state of nature. And so, they were just living wildly, like every man for himself, and you steal and take what you need. And so it would have been a very difficult time. He believed that at some time people came together and created a social contract. Basically, a social contract is an agreement of how you're going to be governed for your own protection. And so in order to be safe and free from the chaos, they gave up some rights so they could have a government, so they could live in peace. And so what you want to know from Hobbs, I was reading Leviathan. Hobbes creates the idea of social contract. Super important. So write it in big letters. Social contract. Now, interestingly enough, he believed that because he believed people were bad at heart, kind of, that you needed a strong central government to keep everybody in line. Okay. And so strong central government, becomes kind of federalism. But the big thing with Hobbes is he is the one who creates the idea of social contract, that people gave up rights in order to have a government so they could be safe. And that's the important or main idea from Hobbes. He's kind of the first one. Now we're going to watch this video on John Locke.
The great question of all ages, John Locke wrote in 1689, has been not whether there be power in the world, nor whence it came, but who should have it. Locke was one of the most influential philosophers of the Enlightenment, whose revolutionary ideas would influence the 18th century's greatest political experiment, the American government. Born in 1632, Locke lived through one of the most volatile times in England's history, with civil war, religious intolerance, and the awakenings of intellectual and scientific thought stirring up controversy. Educated at Oxford, Locke became acquainted with scholars, scientists, and nobility, including the Earl of Shaftesbury, who introduced Locke into political circles during the restoration of Charles II, and would influence Locke's political ideas. Locke opposed absolute monarchy and the theory of divine right of kings. In his influential work, Two Treatises on Government, Locke argued against the theory and offered an alternative idea on how and why a government is formed. To understand political power, wrote Locke, it must be recognized that people are born with natural, God-given rights to life, liberty, and property. Locke stated that people form social contracts in order to protect their rights, agreeing with other men to join and unite into a community, and by their consent create a legitimate government to act according to their will. Locke thought no government can have a right to obedience from a people who have not freely consented to it. If, after a long train of abuses, prevarications, and artifices, the government fails in its duty, the people could withdraw consent and endeavor to put the rule into such hands which may secure to them the ends for which government was first erected. A century later, the enlightened sparks of John Locke's philosophy were aflame in the American colonies. Thomas Jefferson and other leaders of the American Revolution were inspired by Locke's arguments for natural rights, the consent of the governed, and the right to throw off a tyrannical government, all ideas reflected in the Declaration of Independence. Other theories of Locke's, including the separation of power and the separation of church and state, would find their way into the framing of the U.S. Constitution. For the first time, a government would be formed to protect the unalienable rights of the people, with power granted by the people and offering political redress for the people. And the answer to the great question of the ages, who should have the power? As Locke wrote, this doctrine of a power in the people is the best fence against rebellion.
Okay, so that's a really comprehensive review of Locke, but he's really important. So you got to know a lot about John Locke. So you're going to put a lot of things in this box. Again, he's British, he's English, and he had all kinds of ideas about people and their relationships to their monarchs or to their rulers. All right, his first thing, you want to write this down on main ideas, is he believed people have natural rights. Okay, some would say God-given rights, but you have natural rights. He said life, liberty, and property. If you know anything about the Declaration of Independence, it says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the founding fathers were very careful there because they didn't want to put property and have people come to the United States and think they were guaranteed property. So they switched it to pursuit of happiness. When Jefferson, after he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he called it pure Locke. And if you had read the Declaration of Independence recently, when you compare it to what Locke wrote, there is a lot of overlap. So you can almost say that Jefferson plagiarized a bunch of Locke, but he did give him credit. He said it was pure Locke. All right. So very first thing, main idea is natural rights of life, liberty, and property. Okay. He also came up with the idea of the consent of the governed. And so basically governments ruled not by divine right, but by the consent of the governed. And so if they abused the rights of the people, they denied them life, liberty, and property, then it was the power of the people to kind of stand up to the government. So you want to know natural rights, life, liberty, property, and consent of the governed. And that just means that the people consent to the government and they can withdraw that consent. They can get rid of it and say, nope, we're not going to let you govern us. And that's what happened in the American colonies. Okay, you can rebel and dissolve it. And so that started the American Revolution. And again, they're going off these ideas of John Locke. That's why it's so important. John Locke wrote a book called Two Treatises of Government. You saw in the video. He also, believed in social contracts. We saw that. So he kind of took the ideas of Hobbs and ran with it. Although Hobbs was okay with a strong authoritarian government, Locke was not. Okay. So he believed in limited government, that government power should be limited. We've already talked about consent of the governed. He was totally against having absolute monarchies and the idea of divine right. And, the idea that people could overthrow their governments. Those were all important to him. All right, we've done natural rights. One of the things that is interesting about him is he believed in the idea of, it says tabula rasa, but it's rasa, I believe, R-A-S-A. You want to write that in there, that man is born equal. Man is a blank slate. And so that's what tabula rasa is. And so we're all born equal. It doesn't matter if you were of noble birth or your parents were peasant, that everybody is equal. That idea of equality, is kind of fundamental to our documents as well. He also believed in the idea of popular sovereignty, and that is that the power is with the people, not the rulers. So, people give rulers their power. So you want to write down popular sovereignty and the people have the power. And like I said, he influenced the ideas of Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. All right, we're going to skip this video. Let's see how long it is.
So Emma,
yeah, we're going to skip that video. All right, so I'm going to end this video with John Locke, and then I'll pick up in another video with Voltaire and Montesquieu, because I don't think I can get them done with this just single video. So this will be video number 1, and then now just go to video number 2 and continue to fill out your chart.